The line tool. Definitely the most advanced and versatile of the building tools in Landmark. The mouse wheel, like for most tools, scrolls the cursor size in and out, and your other options can be seen down here on the modal toolbar, including G, which snaps to grid, and other things. So, its original purpose was just to draw straight lines. The mouse wheel adjusts the cursor size like I showed you, and it can be different on the start and the end of the lines. So you can have a big start and a smaller ending, or vice versa. You'll notice as I move it around, assuming that my start and end cursors are the same size, that it sometimes turns green. That tells me that I'm aligned on one axis. If I am aligned on two axes, for example, if I place a couple cubes here, so on one axis, it's a light green. On two axes, it goes full bright green. Just a little visual cue to help you see when you have it aligned. And it's yellow when it's not aligned, and it will be, in some situations, red if you can't draw at all. You cannot draw a line that is one voxel by one voxel. It needs a couple voxels width to actually render smooth lines. The lines are going to appear smoothest if the start and the finish are on the same axis, facing the same direction. So if I have, actually let me add those blocks back here. If my start and finish are both facing vertically, like this, it's going to be a pretty smooth line. When I start going from a vertical to a horizontal end, it'll be a little less smooth. It's not too bad in that example, but you will find, depending on how far you stretch, that it can make quite a difference. You also don't necessarily get a consistent width of the line if you don't have a 45-degree or a 90-degree angle, and if your start and finish are at facing different angles. You may not have it consistently wide. That might not be a problem depending on your build, but if that does matter, it's much easier if you keep them both horizontal or keep both ends vertical. So that's the basics. That's how it was intended to be used, but there's so much more than that it does. One caution that I will add is that sometimes you will get slightly different results depending on what compass direction it faces, and I know that sounds weird, but voxels are not, at least currently, 100% symmetrical. So in some situations when you're building with voxels, you may notice slight distortions depending on whether the voxels were drawn north, south, east, west. In this example, they look almost the same. You can see perhaps that there's a little deformation here in this corner. But let's use our paint tool, select another color, and if I paint one by one voxels here, oops, and I'm just painting every alternate voxel, you'll notice that the actual individual voxels of these angled lines are behaving differently on different sides. This side is obviously the cleanest in terms of keeping the straight vertical alignment. There's a little directional change at the top on these two sides, and this one goes the opposite way. And that's another way to see which one is going to behave the way you want it to, if that made a difference to your build. This one, for example, would be the cleanest one if I wanted to use a straight angle to paste elsewhere. All right, sorry, just shifted that up so you can fully see my toolbar, although I don't think I've covered anything yet that you need. But now the next important option for the line tool is something that was added fairly recently. As I mentioned, you have a modal toolbar here. One of the things that isn't immediately obvious from this icon, but if you hold the cursor over it, you'll see the tooltip. Hold F to delete. F toggles between delete and add modes. So in normal add mode, that's what I showed you before, it just draws a line. However, if we go to delete mode, it will delete that line. Now, that is twisting in the middle, so that's not going to cut cleanly, but if I draw a couple of blocks that let me position the line exactly where I want it to, now I can use tweak mode on the line tool just as I can with other tools. I hold down Control as I click, and that brings up the tweak mode menu, and now I can confirm exactly where I want to place the start of the line, there, and the end of the line. And again, I can hold down Control as I click if I want to tweak that around. You can see the line in this case is blue. That's showing me that this is going to delete rather than add. If I just tap the F key, I can toggle back and forth. And I can see when I do that in add mode that I don't have this quite aligned on one axis. So I can shift that over if I want that. In this case, I have positioned my blocks poorly, so that's not going to cut through the entire cylinder. So I'll just reposition that and tweak mode again. And I can play around in tweak mode until I have it perfectly lined up for whatever I want. Oops. Apparently tonight my aim is extremely bad, and I'm going to blame the cats, who are jumping all over my chair. All right, one more time. So I tend to use the line tool in add mode so I can tell when it's gone green and is aligned. Then I tap F to toggle it to delete, and then I click the check mark to confirm. And as you can see, it's sliced very cleanly through my curved pillar here. So that is the cleanest way to draw or to cut a completely straight line through a curved shape. And you can see there's a little bit of dimpling happening here, a little bit of voxel deformation, but it's not bad. It's definitely as good as you're going to get right now. And I can, if I don't want this bit left up here, I can obviously select this and delete it, and I'm left with just this clean shape, which I can now do whatever I want with. As a reminder, that negative option, the F, applies to pretty much every shape. If I were, for example, to paint this gold so we can tell the difference here. Now, if I were to paste this back on top, but just slightly underneath, toggle delete, I can now use it to delete the bottom of that. And if I'm back in add mode, I can paste it again. Oops. Paste it again underneath that, but tweak it down. Oops. Paste without air. And I've now got a nice angled gold tip on this pillar. So that's how you can use the line tool basically like a knife to cut through shapes. Just clean up these blocks here. All right, the line tool has some other unexpected uses that weren't at all planned in development. When a line of 0 length gets applied to a flat surface, it doesn't actually add any voxels, of course, because it's got 0 length. However, it does force the existing voxels to realign with the boundaries of a default voxel. That means, it sounds confusing, but that basically means it can be used to flatten surfaces that have bumps or defects, if they're already flat surfaces and if they align with where a voxel would normally end. And by that I mean, for example, in this just default wall of original Earth, if I paint the voxels here, you can see this is where the voxels naturally align to. And it is those boundaries that the line tool of 0 length will try and enforce. What does that mean? So let's, for example, use a microvoxel, which we created in a tutorial last week. I'm going to paste it over the floor here. And you probably can't see very easily, but that caused the floor to raise up slightly. Let me paste it actually over this grid because you'll see that more easily. So you see how it changed all the voxels underneath so that it raised all of the ones it's touching upwards slightly and has also therefore stretched the ones below it. Even if I delete that voxel, they're still somewhat deformed. I can use the line tool here. I'll scroll it up to a brush size bigger than the deformation. Click a couple times just in the same place, so it's creating a voxel of 0 length. And you can see it's not perfect, but it has slowly improved that so that it is much flatter than it was before. Likewise here, you could see when I put the line tool cursor over it, you could see, hopefully it's visible on your screen, there's a little raised area. And as I click the line tool, it flattens that down, which causes the microvoxel above it to be stretched downwards also. And as a reminder, again from last week's tutorials, the most recently placed or most recently changed voxel will keep its shape. All its neighbors, and every voxel is connected to 26 voxels around it, all of its neighbors are forced to change shape to enable the most recently changed voxel to stay at the same. So that's why when I flattened the voxels below it, that microvoxel got stretched out of shape. That may not immediately sound amazing, but it is actually very useful for cleaning up flaws in a build. Let me demonstrate how we could use a couple of these line tool features together. All right, so for example, these stairs are currently just normal voxel stairs aligned with a normal voxel boundary. If I were to use a curved shape on them though, to, for example, cut them into a curve, say I wanted to do that, and I will use the remove voxels feature, which is basically the same as toggling F. So that's made me a nice set of curved stairs, but you can see, and it's especially visible on shiny materials like this gold, you can see I have some weird buckling effects here on several of the stairs. So line tool, and I can either keep it in the same spot or move it sideways, but the key is that it doesn't vertically go to any distance that would actually draw a line. You could see how that got smoothed out perfectly. And again, So this is a great trick if you're working with curves and you're getting some artifacts like that, or if you've pasted a curved surface onto a flat one, you can often get these little markings. This is a great trick to fix those. There you go. So that is way better. You notice we do still have a little glitch there, and there's perhaps a few things we could do to improve that, but vertically, looking down from the top, our flat surfaces are about 90% better. It's not always perfect, but it is significantly improved. All right, let's see. One more thing with the line tool. Last tutorial we looked at microvoxels and megavoxels, and these are great for doing things with extra small voxels, and you can paste them in a row, and you can make furniture or other things like that out of them, and I'll be doing a little more of that in a future tutorial. But you'll notice that because the microvoxel has been shrunk so its base is higher than a normal voxel border, when I place it against a flat surface like a floor, or it would do the same for a wall, it pulls out its neighbors to meet it. Because the microvoxel was the most recently placed voxel, the neighbors all have to adjust so that the one you're pasting remains the same. So I can directly use the line voxel, or the line tool here, to flatten that down. And while the vertical bulge has now gone fully flat, you will still get some deformation of these going inwards because the microvoxel in the middle is still narrower than normal voxel. That's why we're still seeing a different shape there. But what we could also do is we could just take all of our microvoxels like this, and I'm just going to copy this whole row that I made previously, paste it underneath. Let's go 2 voxels down from these. And float it out one from the wall so it's not directly touching the wall. And now I'm going to, oops, it's just slightly lower than I want to be. So let's see if I can dig myself a little trench. All right. So I'm going to click underneath all of them. And what's this going to do as I draw this line tool underneath? The last one is so tiny, it's a little fiddly to get it. I'm just going to use tweak mode here. It's easier than trying to position it by hand. Okay, so I'm drawing this line. It is totally flat, so it's not actually going to draw a line, but it will force all of the voxels to try and extend to where a normal voxel boundary would be. See? All of them have been stretched downwards, and if I do that once or twice more, just to make sure that it's all the way down, I now have a row of basically microvoxel sticks or strings. So at the bottom, they align, as you can see, perfectly with the voxel boundary. You can tell because I've actually painted one on the wall behind it. At the top, they are still stopping at wherever they originally would have stopped. But these can now be placed, copy and paste one. These can now be placed on a floor or against a wall without making it puff upwards. Again, the voxels around it will still stretch inwards because it's still thinner, but it's not going to pull them upwards. So I can use this anywhere that I want to meet a floor, a wall, or a ceiling, or just another set of voxels without causing that buckling. And one final thing, which I actually almost forgot, the line tool is awesome, oops, when you're trying to straighten out lines in a shape. Let's say we have a sphere. Let's draw a sphere. Here we go, nice big sphere. Boom. Now let's say I want this sphere to be stripy. Maybe I want it to have gold stripes. If I just use the selection tool in Paint, it will correctly paint those voxels, but you can see from what I've just painted that those voxels themselves had gotten deformed when the sphere was created. They can't remain cubes because otherwise we wouldn't have a sphere, we would have a really lumpy collection of voxels. So the process of smoothing it into the cube means the voxels are stretched out of shape, and when we paint them, we don't get straight lines across it. The line tool can fix that at least most of the way. Tweak mode, again, hold down Control as I click, and I will slide that down to the top of this line that I want to fix. I want to make sure my line tool brush is as big or bigger than what I'm using it in. Click once, and now I need to place the second end exactly on top of the first. Down one more. And watch these gold spikes as I click again to confirm. There you go, flat. So if you're making stripy pillars or stripy spheres, this is a great trick to tidy those up. And in general, if I was trying to make a disc, just by making a sphere of the size I wanted my disc, oops, copy, paste, and if I had just cut a slice out of the sphere like that, I could also use the line tool like this to flatten that out. And I could flip it upside down and do the same, or I could use the even easier trick, not line tool related, but since I'm showing you, copy this, and then I paste the exact thing one layer below, but because I don't really want it too thick, I'll remove voxels. Magic. That works because even though I'm saying remove voxels, I am really still pasting air voxels, and the air voxels really are still the same shape as the voxels I would have pasted if they had been solid voxels, which forces the voxels on the underside here to stretch to align with the voxels that I'm pasting. Thus you get the top voxels being exactly aligned with the bottom, and you get a smooth disc. All right, so that's quite enough of the line tool. It is an amazing and very sophisticated tool, and there's actually even more that I haven't covered, but that's enough for this tutorial. So play around with it. It is super powerful. And oh, just the way I did with the microvoxels, I can also use it on megavoxels instead of stretching them down. What it's going to do is force them upwards. So again, as you can see, they've been forced upwards. So again, they align with a normal voxel boundary. All right, thanks for joining. And next, we're going to look at stacking and smoothing.